It's 7:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, and Owen is standing on a train platform doing something he's done every single workday for the last 11 years, checking his phone while he waits half asleep, thumb moving out of habit more than curiosity. There's a notification sitting at the top of his screen. It's not a text. It's not an email from his boss. It's a small deposit notification from a brokerage account, the kind of alert he usually swipes away without reading. But this morning, for no particular reason, he actually looks at the number, and the number is bigger than his paycheck. Not bigger than his salary for the year, bigger than the actual paycheck that's supposed to land in 3 days. His investments made more last month than his job paid him. He stands there for a second, missing the beeping of the train doors, because something has just quietly ended and he didn't even get a card for it. There's a specific point where this happens to people, a day where the money they already own starts out-earning the effort they're putting in every morning. Most people assume that day, if it ever comes, shows up after they retire, some far-off finish line they'll cross in their late 60s with a cake and a handshake. It doesn't work that way. For a shocking number of ordinary people, this day happens quietly in the middle of a completely normal working life, usually years before they expect it, and almost nobody notices when it happens to them because nobody ever taught them to look for it. I'm Reed, and I spend an unreasonable amount of time thinking about the exact mechanics of money, not the hustle culture version, the actual math underneath it. If you want to understand the real turning points in building wealth, instead of vague advice about lattes and budgets, get subscribed, because today we're finding the exact day your money stops needing you and why almost everyone misses it completely. So let's set up a fair comparison, because that's the only way this means anything. Owen and a woman named Priya start at the same company on the same day, same starting salary, same benefits package, same 401k match. For the first 5 years, their financial lives look basically identical. Same apartment size, same car, same weekend habits. The only difference between them is one decision Priya made in her second year that Owen never got around to making. She automated 20% of every paycheck into an index fund the day it landed, and then she genuinely stopped looking at it. Owen meant to do something similar. He just never quite finished setting up the transfer. And then there was always a good reason not to that month: a trip, a new phone, a wedding to attend. Here's the part that should bother you a little. For years, this gap looks tiny. If you looked at Owen and Priya's bank balances after year 1, you'd barely notice a difference. After year 3, Priya has a bit more saved, sure, nice for her, but nothing dramatic. This is exactly why almost nobody takes this seriously early on. The gap in the beginning is boring. It's a rounding error, and boring, invisible gaps are the easiest thing in the world to ignore, right up until they aren't boring anymore. Now let's talk about the actual mechanism behind that one Tuesday morning on the train platform, because it's simpler than people think and also stranger than people think. Any pile of invested money can be thought of as a second employee working for you, one that never sleeps, never negotiates a raise, and never calls in sick. The size of your invested money times its average return equals what that employee earns you in a year. When that number crosses your monthly or annual living expenses, your second employee has officially started out-earning the version of you that gets up and commutes every morning. Financial researchers have a fairly boring name for this crossover point. They call it your coast number, the amount where your existing investments, left completely alone with no further contributions at all, will still grow into enough money to retire on by a normal age purely through compounding. Let's put real numbers on this so it stops being abstract, because I think this is the part most people skip past too quickly. Using a widely cited rule from retirement research, a portfolio can typically support withdrawals of around 4% a year indefinitely without running out, adjusted for typical long-term market returns and inflation. Flip that rule backward and it tells you something remarkable. If your monthly expenses are $3,000, you need your investments to be throwing off $3,000 a month, which works out to $36,000 a year, which means you need roughly $900,000 sitting in the market. That number sounds enormous, almost cruelly out of reach for most people in their 30s glancing at their current balance. But here's the twist nobody explains properly. You don't need to save your way to $900,000 through raw deposits alone. Compound growth does almost all of the heavy lifting in the back half of that climb, which means the actual dollar amount you personally need to contribute if you start early enough is a small fraction of that final number. Here's a cleaner way to see it. Say a 28-year-old already has $60,000 invested from a few years of steady saving. At an average return of 7% a year, that $60,000 left completely untouched untouched with zero additional contributions grows to roughly $230,000 by age 55. Push the timeline to 65 instead of 55, and that same untouched $60,000 turns into something closer to $450,000. Nobody added another dollar. The only ingredient was time. This is why the coast number isn't really about how much you're earning right now. It's about how much time your existing pile of money has left to compound before you need it, and that number is almost always bigger than people assume. This is where Owen and Priya's story gets genuinely uncomfortable, because the 5 years Owen spent meaning to start weren't a delay of 5 years. They were a delay of something closer to a decade of final outcome, because the money that would have gone in during those years never got the 2, 3, 4 decades of compounding it needed to do its work. Waiting doesn't just cost you the money you didn't save. It costs you every single year of growth that money would have quietly generated for the rest of your working life. A dollar invested in your 20s isn't worth a dollar. Depending on how long it sits, it can end up worth 8, 10, sometimes $15 by the time you actually need it. A dollar you invest in your 40s barely has time to double. Same dollar, same discipline, wildly different outcome, purely because of when it entered the game. Now, here's something that surprised researchers who study this exact crossover point, and it's the piece that tends to change how people think about their own paycheck. It isn't your income that determines when your money stops needing you, it's your savings rate, the percentage of what you earn that you actually keep and invest. And this one is almost insulting in how much it matters compared to everything else. Someone earning a modest salary who consistently invests 30% of it will hit their coast number years, sometimes over a decade, before someone earning triple that salary who invests 5%. The size of the paycheck barely moves the needle. The percentage you keep moves almost everything. This is exactly why two people at the same company, same title, same raises, can end up on completely different timelines without either of them ever noticing the fork in the road while it's happening. Let's go back to Priya for a second, because her side of this story is almost aggressively unremarkable. And that's the entire point. She never got a certification in day trading. She never picked a hot stock. She set up one automatic transfer in her second year at the company, and then, by her own admission, forgot her login information more than once. Every month, whether the market was up or down, whether she got a raise or a rough performance review, that same percentage moved out of her checking account before she ever had the chance to spend it. She wasn't managing money. She built a system that managed itself, and then she got out of the way. Owen, meanwhile, wasn't reckless. He wasn't buying luxury items or gambling his salary away. He wasn't the villain of this story. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just doing nothing, which turns out to be the exact same thing as losing, just slower and quieter. That's the uncomfortable truth about this entire subject. You don't need to make a bad decision to end up behind. You just need to make no decision at all consistently for long enough, and the math will happily do the rest of the damage for you without ever raising its voice. So back to that Tuesday morning on the platform. What actually happened to Owen wasn't luck, and it wasn't some sudden windfall. It was compounding, finally becoming visible after years of being invisible. Growth on invested money looks flat and unimpressive for a long time, and then somewhere in the back half of the curve, it starts adding more in a single month than most people earn in weeks. The strange part is the math doing this was working the entire time, quietly in the background, completely unnoticed, long before that notification ever showed up on his screen. The Tuesday didn't create the shift. The Tuesday just revealed a shift that had already happened months earlier, sitting there unnoticed the whole time like a package delivered to the wrong porch. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second, and genuinely tell me in the comments what you think the honest answer is for you. If your job disappeared tomorrow and you never earned another paycheck again, how many months could your current investments alone cover your actual expenses at your current spending? For most people, the honest answer is uncomfortably close to zero, and that's not a moral failing. It's just a number nobody ever asked them to calculate. Once you know your number, something changes at work that has nothing to do with your bank balance directly. It changes how you show up. People who are approaching or have crossed their coast number start negotiating differently. They ask for the raise because the worst outcome is survivable. They stop absorbing extra unpaid work out of fear because fear was the entire mechanism keeping them compliant in the first place. And ironically, this new posture tends to get rewarded, not punished, because confidence reads as competence to almost everyone watching, even when nobody around you knows the actual number behind it. There's also a quieter, stranger effect that shows up once your invested income starts approaching your living costs, and it's one almost nobody warns you about. The math starts feeling less real than it should. Watching a chart go up on a screen doesn't trigger the same emotional response as watching your paycheck land. Even when the chart represents genuinely more money, your brain evolved to treat effort and reward as connected. It never evolved to feel excited about a number moving on its own while you were asleep. This is exactly why so many people who cross this threshold don't throw a party. They just keep going to work the next day, slightly confused about why they don't feel different, when the honest answer is they've already changed and simply haven't caught up to it emotionally yet. Now, here's a mistake worth flagging, because I've watched a version of it happen to almost everyone who gets close to their coast number and lets it go to their head a little too early. The moment people realize their portfolio could theoretically coast to retirement without another dollar, some of them stop contributing entirely, sometimes even before they've actually hit the real number, working off a rough guess instead of the actual math. This is a genuinely expensive mistake, because coasting isn't the same as arriving. If Owen decided the morning after that notification to redirect his entire investment contribution toward a nicer apartment, he wouldn't be coasting to a comfortable retirement. He'd be quietly resetting his own timeline by years, because the calculation only holds if the number he stopped contributing at was actually the number he needed, not the number that simply felt impressive on a random Tuesday. The second mistake runs in the opposite direction, and it might be the more common one. People hit a number that would technically let them ease off, and instead of adjusting anything, they keep grinding at the exact same intensity they had when they had nothing saved at all, never updating the plan to match the new reality. They got the promotion, so to speak, and kept working the old job description. This isn't dangerous the way the first mistake is, but it is its own kind of waste, because the entire point of understanding your coast number is being able to make an informed choice about your own time. Whether that means easing off, changing careers into something you actually enjoy, or simply working with less fear attached to every decision. Knowing the number and never using the information it gives you is like building a very expensive smoke detector and then ignoring it every time it goes off. So where does this actually leave you? Here's the uncomfortable part. And then here's the encouraging part. The uncomfortable part is that the version of you 5 years from now is either going to be closer to that crossover point or further from it, and the gap between those two versions is being decided right now. This month, by a percentage you either automate or don't. Every month you delay doesn't just cost you that month's contribution, it costs you every year of compounding that contribution would have quietly earned for the rest of your working life. The same invisible tax Owen paid without ever seeing the bill. The encouraging part is that the entire mechanism doesn't require a bigger salary, a lucky stock pick, or some secret only wealthy people know about. It requires exactly one boring decision made once and then largely left alone. Priya didn't outsmart Owen. She just automated a percentage and then had the discipline to stop thinking about it, which turns out to be a rarer skill than picking winning investments ever was. Owen eventually did set up his own automatic transfer, by the way, about 4 years after Priya did hers. He's not behind forever. He's just behind by roughly the size of those 4 missing years of compounding, a gap that will follow him quietly for the rest of his working life, unless he does something unusual, like increasing what he invests every time his salary goes up instead of increasing what he spends, which is exactly the one habit that would let him start closing the gap instead of watching it grow. That's really the whole story here. Not a get-rich scheme, not a market prediction, just one specific, calculable day sitting somewhere out in your future. The day your invested money finally starts out-earning your effort. Most people will hit it and not even notice, the same way Owen almost missed his own on a train platform on an ordinary Tuesday. The only real question left is whether you find out your number on purpose or whether you find out by accident, years later than you could have. If this got you thinking about your own number, stick around, because next we're going to break down exactly how to calculate yours in under 5 minutes, using the actual numbers from your own life instead of someone else's example.